If you go back into the history of this country, I don't think most people know that restriction of voting rights is almost more of our history than actual access to the ballot. Hey, Mark Trahant here. We have another edition of Breaking History. Today we're going to be talking with Michelle Sparck, who runs the Alaska Native Vote Program for the Alaska Federation of Natives. Get out the Native Vote, and she's the director of that. This is an amazing state. Alaska Natives make up about 20% of the state, so they have a huge impact on what could be possible at the polls. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe, comment, and share. This is Breaking History, and I'm Mark Trahant. Last week, the Supreme Court heard a very important case on voting rights, and it could change the way we vote in almost every state. Here in Alaska, there's a long history of problems with voting. I'm talking with Michelle Sparck. One of your jobs working with the Alaska Federation of Natives is helping people to vote. What does it mean when voting rights are so under assault right now?
You know, when you talk about election integrity in our parts of the state, in the roadless parts of Alaska, where there's 104 precincts that you have to use airplanes and you have to use the U.S. Postal Service to get an election set up with the ballots, that's our questioning election integrity. How can we make sure that these are there in time and how we're able to vote and take advantage of our constitutional right with ease and with also language accessibility? We are dealing with very, very unique, quirky places that weather may be a factor, or, the volunteer level. There's all kinds of things that can act as a barrier to voting, but you throw in politics and you throw in law or interpretations of law that create more barriers. We are looking at a really, really hard time.
If you go back into the history of this country, I don't think most people know that restriction of voting rights is almost more of our history than actual access to the ballot. 1924
yes.
Citizenship Act didn't mean anything in places like Alaska.
Right. It took us a lot longer for that. Women did get the first right to vote in Alaska before they did downstates, but our civil rights for the Native folks came a lot later. But with us getting that right, or before we got that right, we had to have three non-natives write an affidavit to say that we were white enough in our behavior and in assimilation that they were guaranteeing us an ability to be able to vote.
It's amazing. I know my grandfather, before he could sell a house, had to take out a certificate of competency.
And that movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, showed us, I'm an incompetent, and you had to state that for the record before you were able to conduct any business on your own behalf. You
go to great lengths to get around all these restrictions and to basically say we're going to do it anyway. Maybe talk about some of the things you are doing.
We've had a lot of people very embarrassed about when we ask them if they have a plan to vote. And we have them very embarrassed and maybe a little quiet about it. And then we ask, is there a history with the court system? Have you served time? And that reveals, even if it happened 20, 30 years ago, you have a lot of people believe that they are out of the system entirely. So restorative justice is not very well known in our community. And we just had focus groups in every hub, like Dillingham, Bethel, Nome, Kotzebue, Uktiavik. And a lot of them brought that up, that they had family members or they themselves had records and they weren't sure they were able to vote. So that's one thing we're trying to do is try to ascertain their eligibility, get them registered, and also inform them on how to make good decisions so that they can vote the right way. And ranked choice voting and a witness signature on the absentee ballots, those kind of things that can exhaust our ballot ability and get our ballot thrown out because we did not get a witness signature. Those are things that can't be remedied right now. So it's something we try to get ahead of.
As the country figures out how to make voting more fair, it really is interesting that Alaska is the first with ranked choice voting and to get people to think about how you can make a broader electorate.
Ranked choice voting has been a very moderating effect on our state legislature. And we have a lot more people that look like us and sound like us running for office when there are no more gatekeepers or party politics that are forcing the shaping of a ballot. And it's been really freeing and a good exercise for our community to say, you know what, I'm going to throw my hat in, even if I don't have support, even though I don't know what a campaign manager is. People are stepping up. And we got our first Alaska Native ranked into Congress in the first year that we were able to use that. But open primaries have been the real big game changer for us. Again, like I said, there are no more gatekeepers on preventing us on being able to say, I want to run and I want to serve.
This is the week of the Alaska Federation of Natives Conference, which is the largest convention in Indian country with about 6,000 or 7,000 people. And
Yes.
You use that in the voting process. Maybe talk about that for next year.
We are. We actually moved the convention for a week later next year so that we can hit the early voting dates. So we're going to be able to actually walk across the street from the Denina Center to City Hall over there, and we are going to see people go to vote. And we're also going to do a big absentee ballot push, which is something that a lot of our people like to, they prefer to vote in person. So if they're not comfortable standing in a line in City Hall, we're going to promote people registering for their ballot to be mailed to them and bring it with them here so that we can go drop it off, or they can go drop it off themselves across the street.
You know, so much of this is about parity, reaching at least parity with population. And Alaska's 20% of the state, and yet in terms of political power, it hasn't gotten near that yet.
We have got, among the adults, we have the ability to affect 25% of the vote. And last year we voted at only 11%. And I appreciate President Malat saying in his president's report that we need to recognize that we were once universal voters. We did it in 1982. We did it through the mid-1990s. But I think it's only the elders that are still around from that time that are the only voters. I mean, I'm an anomaly, I'm a super voter, but not all of my contemporaries are. So that's our challenge, is to super voters, is to get your family who low propensity voters and people who typically don't vote at all. Our challenge is to get at least 5 people in your that you know to go vote.
You know, it's funny, when I was a kid, and I'm one of those elder super voters, and when I was a kid, I remember going with my grandmother and holding her hand when she would go to the polls.
Making
and so
it
it was a family
affair.
experience.
A
Yeah.
family affair is a big difference, and that makes it a cultural value. And that's what we're trying to reignite in our people and our communities. We have such growth in our Alaska Native corporations and our Alaska Native social service organizations that people don't translate that into decision-making bodies, and that we need to be a big part of that, not just in going out to vote, but also running for office.
You know, one of the things that I don't think the rest of the country knows is how extraordinary Alaska is in a lot of ways. But one is, I think about the election of Lisa Murkowski and how that happened really here at AFN. It was in Fairbanks. Yes. At AFN, and it changed the whole landscape.
It changed the landscape, and it went to show that with a lot more grassroots and persistent communication, that can get you good results. And, you know, like Arizona Native Vote, New Mexico Native Vote, NAVA, North Dakota Native Vote, all these great groups that have Get Out the Native Vote programs like Alaska does, they have been making sustained efforts in the community and not just 3 months before an election. And I think that will make a big difference.
Oh, that's so important. You see people come in and everyone looks at them with that side eye that, oh yeah, they're here for the election to vote. And being there all the time changes the game.
Being there all the time makes us more trustworthy and also a trusted source, and that we will get the right information to them. And again, we're not here to tell you who to vote for. We are here to say, let's do it correctly so that it doesn't get thrown out, and let's make good decisions while we're at it.
That's a good ending. Thank you, Michelle.
Oyana.
This has been another edition of Breaking History. Be sure to subscribe, share, and comment. Thank you for being with us.